Thanks, Robert. Thanks to Phil and Des and the Equity Events team of always putting on a great event, and of course the sponsors that have given us the opportunity to speak to you all. Real privilege to lead out at the Critical Minerals Green Energy session and talk about vanadium. So safer, longer, greener, stronger. This is up on the website and on the ASX platform as well, so you can read the disclaimer at your leisure. Compelling investment. In the next 14 and a half minutes, I'll give you a bit of a snapshot of that, but come and see us at the booth just out the door there and catch up a little bit further. A lot of discussion will be around vanadium batteries, and we're really excited about where the trajectory of those batteries and where that's headed. So yeah, come and have a chat to us. We've got a strategically important Tier 1 project, very large scale project, very high grade. It's going to make a real significant difference in the vanadium market. Been really focused on building international partnerships around that, offtake, development partners, really strengthening the whole team behind us. We're really well placed in WA with supporting infrastructure, a brilliant team that we've been able to build over the last few years to drive this project through. The ESG performance that Robert's talking about, fundamental for all our businesses if we're moving into development, looking for funding around the globe. Really important. And the last point, really strong collaboration with our traditional owners and those that are aware of what's happening in Western Australia with the new Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, really key. And we've been working on this for some time and we've got a great relationship with traditional owners, but really important as we step through all that process. Quick snapshot of the corporate structure. Key $16.5 million cash at bank at the end of June, and a market cap of $70 odd million. So an EV of only $50 odd million. So in my humble opinion, very cheap. Shareholding structure, we're very pleased to have Resource Capital Funds as a major shareholder on our register. They've done a lot of work at looking into vanadium, understanding the vanadium market, and they've come on board with us. They own 18% of our stock, and very supportive long-term shareholder. You see there, as a junior, we've got a pretty strong institutional and high net worth register. So over 50% of the register is held in that space, and directors and management with a pretty significant holding on a fully diluted basis. Whoop. Buzzer's stopping working. There we go. Very experienced board and management team and been very stable on the board side with a couple of new additions. Joe Gaines is our most recent new addition to the board. So Joe's come with a very strong, political background, if you like. So she was an advisor to the Premier of WA up until the most recent election, so really strong. Again, in that ESG space, as we're moving through all these phases and engaging with government, really strong strengthening of the board there. David English is our Chief Operating Officer. He's built mines in WA, he's built some big projects, he's also operated vanadium projects, so really key in that process. There we go. So vanadium is all about the transition to net zero. Primarily at the moment it's used in steel, so 80-90% is used in the steel market, but very strong applications in steel to reduce emissions. But the really important, exciting area is going to be in the vanadium batteries, so vanadium redox flow batteries, which are really getting a lot of traction now and are going to be very important as we move into that transition into renewable energy. Snapshot of the project. We're sitting there in the midwest of Western Australia, up near the township of Meekatharra. We've got we've got a very large high-grade resource sitting there, which produces a very high vanadium in concentrate grade. We then do the processing on site in that downstream stage. So conventional integrated processing on site. So low risk with using natural gas, so a low emissions fuel, all of our processing source. We produce a very high purity product. Again, really important when you're in the battery space to have that high purity product. We also have an ilmenite byproduct for the first 8 or 9 years, which for our financiers is going to be really critical. To have two revenue streams in those early years is really important. On the financiers, we've got support from of all things, the Danish Export Credit Agency. So that's linked to some equipment finance that we're going to look at, equipment purchasing we're looking at putting in place. So the Danes have identified the project and they're supporting us. Obviously we're now also very engaged with the Australian federal government on that same aspect. Snapshot from our study we put out last August. Annual average EBITDA around about 200 million Aussie a year, and we're going to be 20-25 years of operation. So a very significant project. What we're doing right now, and we've been working on this since August last year, we put out our integration study. We're now in the implementation phase, and that's really getting us ready for shovel ready in that FID. So key parts of that, building up our financial model to a bankable level. We're in a feed study phase, so we've got all the engineers and taking the engineering study from a DFS point of view all the way through to what is a more bankable and deliverable point of view. Engagement with our traditional owners, which, as I said, very, very important, and then progressing those permits and approvals process. Really strong team of partners. As I said, we've had a real focus on strengthening our team around us, and not just our own team, but the people that are supporting us. So Iron Mining and GR Engineering are part of what we're calling an integrated project team that's delivering on this feed study, getting the project shovel ready. FL Schmidt will be our equipment supplier. FL Schmidt are the leaders in vanadium processing technology. So that's the linkage back through to the Danish Export Credit Agency, so really strong position there. APA operations, I sort of skipped over the earlier slide that showed our location, but we're going to be using gas as our heat source, as I mentioned. APA operations will be building a gas pipeline for us, so we're really engaged with them in those early work phases to get that permitting and approvals ready for that gas pipeline to be built. And anyone that was in here earlier listening to the Fenix presentation, we will be exporting and bringing some materials in through the port of Geraldton, so a real key piece of infrastructure for us. Environment and heritage, that ESG component. We've been on this journey for quite some time, investing a lot of effort and time into really building these relationships, strong, respectful relationships with both on the environmental approval side, but really critically with our traditional owner groups. June was a really big month for us, so we had the chair of the EPA and WA on site with us to really get a really good understanding of exactly what the project is, what our impacts are going to be, what our mitigations are going to be, how we're going about it. But equally importantly, we also had some really good meetings and interaction with the traditional owner groups. So moving both of those things in parallel, really, really important. And so we've had, as I say, fantastic June, and we're really strongly positioned for the second half of this year to move all those approvals through. Part of the whole ESG and I guess our commitment to what we're doing in the renewable space is, this is just a snapshot of one example, but our accommodation village, we're going to have a 250, 300 person camp built on site. Our plan is to put solar panels on all the roofs and generate our own power from that, and we'll have a vanadium redox flow battery. V-Light's our subsidiary that's in that space, but we'll have a vanadium redox flow battery hooked up to all that. So that'll be off-grid effectively, a self-sustained camp that generating its own energy, and also proof of concept around the vanadium redox flow batteries. More around, our quality commercial partnerships. So again, building these really robust relationships with some really strong international partners. So in the steel space, we've got an MOU with Tata Steel in India. I was lucky enough to go to India as a part of a WA government trade mission last July. And from that, we've got a MOU with Tata Steel. And then on the battery side, we've got an MOU with Electric, which is a vanadium battery developer who's actually got presence here in Australia as well as Europe, Middle East and obviously in India, but some really strong positions there. And then LE System is a Japanese partner that we've been working with for 2 years now on developing up our own vanadium electrolyte strategy. So there's a bit more on that further in, but those connections into, I guess, what we're seeing is really strong trading partners for Australia, that the federal government is trying to drive those relationships. We're really at the forefront of that. Part of all that is, where does vanadium come from? Currently, as it says there, it's sort of almost 80% of vanadium comes from China and Russia. So we can see the Western world, if you like, North America, Europe, historically has been really reliant on Russia as a feed source for vanadium. Now, since Vladimir Putin decided to invade the Ukraine, that's had a lot of pressure on it. So particularly the North Americans, but also the Europeans, are very actively looking for alternative sources of vanadium. We sit here in Australia with some very strong vanadium resources. I know up in northwest Queensland we've got some great resources there, but also in WA. So there's two really strong hubs of vanadium resources. We are in the vanguard to be one of the first developers in that space, and delivering vanadium into that market is now under a lot of pressure because of the geopolitical risks. Just briefly, why vanadium batteries? As I say, come to the booth. Jason Barnett, our BD in the energy space, will be there and can give you a big introduction into these batteries. But they're for long duration storage. They don't compete with the lithium ion in your mobile devices or in the smaller, shorter duration storage. These are ideal for 4 to 12 hours of storage. Very safe. It's a liquid electrolyte, so you're not going to get any of the thermal runaway. You're not going to have a fire. No degradation over the life, 20, 25-year life of these things. They don't degrade. So whatever storage you've got day one, 20 years' time, they'll still have that same storage. So fantastic solution. But some of the things we really like down the bottom there, it's a single element in there. It's only vanadium, as opposed to we call it a lithium-ion battery, but as we all know, there's a lot of other elements that make up that battery. It's only vanadium in a weak acid solution that is the driving force of these things, and that vanadium is 100% recyclable. So at the end of the 20-year life, once that battery is worn out from a physical aspect, the vanadium can be repurposed. So it's a fantastic technology, and it's really getting a lot of traction right now. All the commodity analysts now are on board on this. They're seeing this happening, and so that chart was developed by a group called Project Blue, but the snapshot in the middle was from CRU. So Project Blue have put together some information around where they see the demand for vanadium going into batteries out to 2033. CRU have also come up with some numbers there. So they say there's going to be 25,000 tonnes of vanadium needed in batteries by 2031. We'll be producing around 7,000 tonnes. So you can see, huge opportunity. We'll be one of the first into that space, but the industry in Australia has got a massive opportunity to really build into that and supply that market. We are very much into our vertical integration, so we're looking at ore in the ground all the way through to electrolyte, and then being able to facilitate the battery. So we'll, as I said earlier, we'll mine and produce a concentrate, vanadium-rich concentrate on site. Then we do our first step of downstream processing on site as well. So we take that concentrate and we produce a high purity vanadium pentoxide. That's the precursor for the electrolyte production. So we're now looking at, I'll flick on to the next slide, we're now looking at how do we do that and where do we do that. So as I said earlier, we're working closely with LE System. They've taken our raw material, taken it all the way through. The photo on the left-hand side is actually our vanadium electrolyte. So that's our product all the way through, and we've demonstrated now that that's a really high-quality electrolyte that can be used by all the big battery manufacturers. It's effectively ready to go into those spaces. Middle photo is LE Systems' vanadium electrolyte facility in Fukushima up in Japan, where we visited last November. We're looking at replicating that, probably a little bit bigger than the one they've got, but that's something that we're really strongly working on now alongside LE System to develop up that and look at deploying these facilities around Australia. On the right-hand side is a bunch of the electrolyte. What you have is a large volume of liquid that really facilitates these batteries. So what you want to do is build your electrolyte production facility close to where you're going to make your batteries. So that's why we're really keen on having sort of almost modular plants that we can have dotted around Australia there. Whenever the big renewable energy centres are, we can have one of these facilities close to them where the electrolyte can go into those. On that front, Jason was recently at the open day for a big battery that's just been commissioned in South Australia, so the Yadlamelka, so the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, 2 megawatt, 8 megawatt hour, really exciting development. ARENA partly funded that, so all the information is going to come through to us. On the right-hand side is what a lot of you in Queensland will have seen just very recently with the Premier up in Townsville launching VECO's vanadium electrolyte facility, but also talking about the vanadium battery that they're looking to bring in association with VECO into the grid in Queensland. So really, really exciting developments. Key for us, we're on the cusp of this. We're doing an independent technical expert report at the moment. That'll be out in the next few weeks. So really on the cusp of delivering on that, and so that comes into the funding mix. As I said before, we've got Resource Capital Funds as a major shareholder who will be supporting that process. The Danish Export Credit Agency already there with $150 million of financing support, heavily engaged with the federal government around additional support and really building towards that position of being able to fund the project. So very much a compelling investment, industry-leading Tier 1 project in what is very much a critical mineral. Federal government is very much on board with vanadium as a critical mineral. Very much linked into how do we better deploy our renewable energy, how do we increase the efficiency of our renewable energy. Very experienced, strong team focused on delivery. As I talked about, the focus around the environmental approvals, our traditional owner engagement, the next few months are going to be really key on that. We're expecting to get our environmental review document submitted by the end of next week, which is really a key milestone for us to progress that EPA process. And as I said, we've got some really good quality investors and partners on board to actually help us deliver this project. And so on that note, thank you very much.